September 14th, 1944, 13:47 hours, 27,000 feet above the Rhine Valley. Lieutenant Robert Hendricks squeezed his trigger for exactly 1.2 seconds. A burst so brief, his wingman barely saw the tracers leave his P-47 Thunderbolt. 300 yards ahead, a Focke-Wulf FW-190 disintegrated in a shower of burning metal. The German pilot never saw it coming. He couldn't have, because Hendricks wasn't aiming where the enemy plane was. He was aiming where a gyroscopic computer told him the enemy plane would be. The Luftwaffe had spent 5 years mastering deflection shooting, the art of leading a moving target through instinct and experience. In a single month, American technology made that expertise obsolete. What followed wasn't just air superiority. It was a mathematical execution. The mathematics of aerial gunnery had remained fundamentally unchanged since World War I. To hit a maneuvering aircraft, a pilot needed to aim ahead of the target, a technique called deflection shooting. The variables were staggering: relative velocities of both aircraft, angle off the target's flight path, range to target, ballistic drop of ammunition, and the curvature of the bullet's trajectory. Training command documents from Maxwell Field, Alabama, detailed the standard instruction program. Student pilots received 40 hours of ground school on deflection shooting theory. They studied diagrams showing lead angles at various speeds and ranges. They memorized formulas. They practiced on clay pigeon ranges. Then they went into combat and discovered that theory meant nothing when a Messerschmitt Bf-190 was coming at them at a combined closing speed of 600 miles per hour. 8th Air Force statistical analyses from early 1944 revealed a devastating reality. The average American fighter pilot fired 1,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition for every confirmed aerial victory. Combat camera footage reviewed by training specialists showed that 95% of air-to-air firing occurred at ineffective ranges or with insufficient lead angle. Pilots were missing by margins measured in dozens of feet. The problem wasn't courage or determination. American pilots were aggressive and well-trained. The problem was human neurology operating at speeds evolution had never prepared it for. A pilot's brain, attempting to calculate deflection angles while pulling 4 G-forces in a turning fight, simply couldn't process the variables fast enough. First Lieutenant James Calloway, 56th Fighter Group, documented his experience in a letter dated March 1944, now preserved in the Air Force Historical Research Agency. I had a 190 dead in my sights at 300 yards, perfect position. I fired a 3-second burst, maybe 150 rounds. I watched my tracers pass behind him by what looked like 10 feet. He broke left and was gone. I'd done everything the instructors taught us. The bastard should have been dead. Instead, I was the one shaking. The Luftwaffe faced the same challenge, but they'd had 5 years to develop solutions through experience. German fighter pilots entering combat in 1944 averaged 240 hours of flight training. More critically, the survivors of the Battle of Britain and the Eastern Front had developed an almost supernatural ability to judge deflection angles through thousands of hours of combat experience. Hauptmann Wilhelm Bader, a 57-kill ace playing with Jagdgeschwader 3, described deflection shooting in his combat diary captured after his death near Schweinfurt in October 1944. You don't aim, you feel. Your body knows the angle. Your hands know the lead. After 200 combats, the calculation becomes instinct. The enemy appears in your windscreen and your muscles respond before your mind registers the geometry. This experience gap created a killing differential. German aces were achieving kill ratios of 5-to-1 or higher against newer American pilots. The 8th Air Force was losing fighters at unsustainable rates during escort missions deep into Germany. In January 1944 alone, bomber escort operations cost 206 fighters shot down, with 206 pilots killed or captured. General James Doolittle, commanding the 8th Air Force, faced a mathematical reality that no amount of bravery could overcome. His fighter groups were bleeding experienced pilots faster than the training pipeline could replace them. Each loss meant not just one dead pilot, but the loss of hundreds of hours of irreplaceable combat experience. The Luftwaffe's experience advantage was compounding with each passing month. The Army Air Force Proving Ground Command at Eglin Field, Florida, had been wrestling with this problem since 1942. Engineers knew that deflection shooting was a computational problem. The necessary lead angle could be calculated precisely if you knew the variables. The challenge was creating a device that could perform those calculations in real time during the chaos of air combat. Traditional gun sights were elegantly simple. A pilot looked through a reflector glass that projected an illuminated reticle, typically a circle with a center dot. The pilot placed the dot on the target and fired. This worked perfectly for stationary ground targets. For aerial combat, it was worse than useless because it encouraged pilots to aim directly at the target, guaranteeing a miss on any maneuvering aircraft. The British had attempted to solve this with the Mark II Gyro Gunsight, deployed in limited numbers in 1943. The device used a gyroscope to sense aircraft rotation and adjusted the reticle accordingly. Combat trials showed modest improvement, but the system required pilots to manually input target wingspan and range, tasks impossible to perform accurately during high-speed combat. What American fighter pilots needed wasn't an improved aiming device. They needed a computer that could solve the deflection problem automatically in real time while the pilot focused on flying and fighting. In the summer of 1943, that computer was being perfected in a classified laboratory in Massachusetts.
The Mk.14 Gyro Gunsight represented one of the most sophisticated analog computers ever created for combat operations. Developed by the Division 7 Gunsight Group at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology under Office of Scientific Research and Development contracts, the device could perform complex ballistic calculations 20 times per second, far faster than any human brain operating under combat stress. The technical specifications, documented in Army Air Force's Technical Order 16-1-50, dated June 1944, revealed extraordinary engineering. The sight contained a 2-axis gyroscope mounted on precision bearings, capable of detecting aircraft rotation rates as small as 0.5 degrees per second. An electrical computing unit processed gyroscope inputs along with airspeed data from the pitot-static system and altitude information from the altimeter connection. The computing mechanism used a series of precision cams and electrical resolvers, analog computational elements that could multiply and divide input values mechanically. These components calculated the required lead angle based on the rate at which the pilot was turning to track the target. The output drove servo motors that positioned the illuminated reticle, moving it ahead of where the pilot was actually aiming. The operational principle was elegantly simple in concept, devastatingly complex in execution. When a pilot turned to follow an enemy aircraft, the gyroscope detected the turning rate. The computer interpreted this rotation as the rate necessary to track the target's angular movement. It then calculated how far ahead of the current aim point the bullets would need to travel to intercept the target, accounting for the ballistic trajectory of .50 caliber ammunition at the current airspeed and altitude. Captain Thomas Ridley, an MIT engineer assigned to Wright Field's fighter branch, explained the system in a technical lecture preserved in Air Force records. The pilot doesn't calculate anything. He simply places the reticle on the target and keeps it there. The sight measures how fast he's turning to maintain that track. That turning rate contains all the information needed to compute the deflection angle. The computer does the mathematics and positions the reticle ahead of the target automatically. When the reticle appears centered on the target, the pilot is actually aiming at the correct lead angle. Initial testing at Eglin Field in March 1944 produced results that skeptical pilots found difficult to believe. Test pilots firing at radio-controlled target drones achieved hit rates of 60%, 6 times higher than the 10% hit rate typical with standard reflector sights. More importantly, the improvement was consistent across pilots with varying skill levels. A newly trained pilot using the Mk.14 could match the accuracy of a veteran using traditional sights. Colonel Bernard Levy, director of fighter requirements at Army Air Force's headquarters in April 1944, reviewed the test data. His memorandum, dated April 18th, stated, "The Mk.14 Gunsight represents a revolutionary advance in fighter effectiveness. This device doesn't make pilots better shooters, it makes the shooting problem itself irrelevant. We must expedite production and deployment immediately." Production contracts went to General Electric's Buffalo plant, which had been manufacturing turbo superchargers for B-17 bombers. The transition to Gunsight production required retooling precision machinery and training workers to handle components with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Each Gunsight contained over 200 individual parts, many requiring hand-fitting and adjustment. The first production units emerged in June 1944. Priority allocation went to the 8th Air Force's P-47 Thunderbolt groups, which were suffering the highest loss rates during bomber escort missions. Installation teams from Wright Field traveled to bases in England, working around the clock to retrofit aircraft while maintaining operational schedules. Technical Sergeant Howard Walsh, an armament specialist with the 78 Fighter Group at Duxford, England, documented the installation process in his maintenance log. Each installation took 8 hours. We had to mount the gyro unit, run electrical connections, calibrate the computing circuits, and bore sight the system. The tolerances were tighter than anything we'd worked with. 1/1000th of an inch off in the gyro mounting, and the whole system would be inaccurate. It required a different operational technique documented in revised tactical manuals distributed to squadrons. Pilots needed to turn on the sight's gyro 3 minutes before entering combat to allow it to stabilize. They had to maintain steady tracking on targets rather than making abrupt corrections. The reticle would appear to lag behind the target, actually leading it by the computed deflection angle, which contradicted every instinct trained pilots had developed. Major Robert Johnson, a 27-kill ace with the 56th Fighter Group, described his first combat mission with the Mk.14 in an interview conducted by Air Force historians in 1945. "I didn't trust it. 5 years of flying had taught me to lead targets by instinct. Now this gadget was telling me to aim somewhere that looked wrong, but orders were orders. First engagement, I got a 10-9 in my sight picture at 400 yards. I kept the reticle on him like the manual said, even though every nerve was screaming that I was aiming too far ahead. I fired a 2-second burst, the 10-9 flew directly into my rounds. I watched my bullets walk up his fuselage from tail to cockpit. He went down in flames. I'd used maybe 80 rounds. Before the Gunsight, I'd have fired 200 and probably missed entirely." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
August 27th, 1944, 15:23 hours. 24,000 feet above Osnabrück, Germany. Oberleutnant Franz Keller, a 34-kill veteran of Jagdgeschwader 26, executed what should have been a textbook attack on a formation of P-47 Thunderbolts. His FW-190 dove from above and behind, using the sun for concealment, a tactic that had worked flawlessly for 3 years of combat. Keller had identified his target, a P-47 flying slightly outside the formation's protective envelope. He calculated his deflection angle based on 180 previous combats, adjusted his aim point to lead the American fighter by what experience told him was exactly the right amount, and triggered a 3-second burst from 350 yards. His 20mm cannon rounds passed harmlessly through empty air where the P-47 had been a fraction of a second earlier. Before Keller could register the miss, the American pilot, Lieutenant Donald Pierce of the 353rd Fighter Group, had already fired. Pierce's Gunsight had detected Keller's attack through the aircraft's turning motion as he tracked the German fighter. The Mk.14 had computed the deflection angle in milliseconds. 50 caliber rounds tore through Keller's engine cowling and cockpit. The German ace was dead before his aircraft entered its final dive. His wingman, radioing the engagement to ground control, used a phrase that would appear repeatedly in Luftwaffe communications over the following weeks. "The Americans are not missing anymore." Luftwaffe intelligence had noticed a pattern beginning in early August. Loss rates for experienced pilots, those with more than 10 confirmed victories, had suddenly increased by 40%. These were not novices making tactical errors. These were survivors of years of aerial combat, men whose deflection shooting skills had been honed through hundreds of engagements. Generalmajor Adolf Galland, general of the fighter arm, received troubling reports compiled by the Luftwaffe operations staff. A document dated September 3, 1944, captured after the war and now housed in the National Archives, detailed the analysis. Enemy fighter accuracy has increased dramatically since early August. Our pilots report that American fighters are achieving kills with significantly fewer rounds expended. Multiple veteran pilots have been shot down in circumstances where enemy deflection shooting demonstrated impossible precision. Investigation into potential causes is urgent. The German military intelligence service, the Abwehr, had obtained fragments of information about improved American gunsights through interrogation of captured pilots. However, these reports were incomplete and underestimated the technology's capability. German intelligence assessed the devices as improved versions of British gyro sights, helpful but not revolutionary. This misunderstanding proved catastrophic. Luftwaffe tactical doctrine, perfected over 5 years of warfare, emphasized high-speed attacks from advantageous positions. German pilots were trained to make one firing pass and then disengage, using superior energy tactics to set up another attack. This doctrine assumed that both sides operated under the same gunnery limitations. The Mk.14 eliminated those limitations. American pilots no longer needed perfect positioning or extended firing opportunities. A 2-second tracking shot from any angle within 400 yards had become potentially lethal. The Luftwaffe's tactical advantage, their experience-based deflection shooting superiority, had been negated by a box of gyroscopes and computing circuits. Captain Richard Hayes, 359th Fighter Group, documented the transformation in his combat diary, excerpts of which were published in Air Force magazine in 1946. Before the Gunsight, I'd fire at anything that crossed my nose and hope for hits. After the Gunsight, I became surgical. Track the target for 2 seconds, let the computer solve the geometry, fire when the reticle stabilizes. I went from 1 probable kill in my first 20 missions to 5 confirmed kills in my next 10. The difference wasn't my skill, it was the math. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots emerged through radio intercepts translated by the 8th Air Force's Signals Intelligence Unit. German pilots were reporting that American fighters had become markedly more dangerous. Conversations between pilots and ground controllers, intercepted and decoded, revealed growing concern about what they termed the new American shooting technique. A radio transcript from September 12th, preserved in military intelligence archives, captured the confusion. Ground control, this is White Leader. We engaged 4 Thunderbolts, executed standard bounce from 6 o'clock high. All 4 missed on the first pass, impossible shooting angle. All 4 turned immediately and engaged. They're firing from deflection angles we would never attempt, and they're hitting. Mk.3 is down, Mk.4 is damaged. Request immediate support. The Luftwaffe attempted to develop countermeasures documented in captured tactical directives. A memorandum from Jagdgeschwaders 2's operations office dated September 20th instructed pilots to avoid extended turning engagements with American fighters and to execute only high-speed slashing attacks with immediate disengagement. This represented a complete inversion of established doctrine, which had emphasized sustained combat to leverage German pilots' superior experience. These countermeasures proved ineffective. The Mk.14's advantage operated across all engagement geometries. Whether in turning fights or slashing attacks, American pilots who could track a target for even 2 seconds could achieve lethal hits. The computational advantage was insurmountable through tactical adjustments alone.
First Lieutenant Eugene Barton, 78th Fighter Group, encountered this reality on October 1st during an engagement near Frankfurt. His after-action report, filed with 8th Fighter Command, described shooting down 3 Bf-109s in a single engagement lasting less than 4 minutes. They were good pilots, executing proper evasive maneuvers. 10 weeks ago, I'd have been lucky to damage one of them. With the Gunsight, I killed all 3 with an average of 120 rounds per aircraft. I wasn't a better pilot than I'd been in July. I just had better equipment. The cumulative effect across dozens of daily engagements was devastating. 8th Air Force loss rates declined by 35% between August and October 1944, while German fighter losses increased proportionately. The mathematics of air combat had fundamentally shifted. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
January 12, 1945, 14:05 hours, 19,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley. The final combat mission that would demonstrate the Mk.14 Gunsight's complete dominance occurred not as a massive engagement, but as a routine patrol that illustrated how thoroughly air combat had been transformed. Flight Lieutenant George Brennan, 357th Fighter Group, led a 4-ship flight of P-51 Mustangs, providing area coverage for bomber formations returning from targets in central Germany. His formation encountered 6 Bf-109s attempting to intercept the bombers, a standard tactical situation that 3 months earlier would have resulted in an extended dogfight with uncertain outcomes. The engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. All 6 German aircraft were shot down. The American flight expended a total of 1,840 rounds of .5 caliber ammunition, an average of 307 rounds per kill. No American aircraft sustained damage. Brennan's after-action report, filed at 18:20 hours that evening, treated the engagement as routine. It was. This routine nature represented the revolution's completion. What had once required exceptional skill and luck had become predictable, repeatable, industrial. The Mk.14 had transformed aerial combat from an art form practiced by gifted individuals into a technical process executable by adequately trained pilots with computing assistance. Strategic bombing survey data compiled after Germany's surrender quantified the Gunsight's role in establishing air superiority. Between August 1944 and March 1945, 8th Air Force fighters shot down 4,738 German aircraft in air-to-air combat while losing 1,122 fighters to all causes, a kill ratio exceeding 4-to-1. In the same period during 1943, before the Mk.14's introduction, kill ratios had averaged 1.8-to-1. The human cost of this technological advantage was measured in lives saved and lost. American fighter pilot casualties declined by 42% in the final 9 months of the European War compared to the preceding 9 months. Conversely, Luftwaffe fighter pilot losses accelerated catastrophically. Of the approximately 8,000 German fighter pilots serving in January 1944, fewer than 1,200 remained alive and uncaptured by war's end. Colonel Francis Gabreski, America's leading European theater ace with 28 confirmed victories, reflected on the Gunsight's impact in a 1946 interview preserved in Air Force oral history archives. The Mk.14 didn't make me a better pilot. It made being a pilot easier. Before the Gunsight, every shot was a calculated gamble based on experience and instinct. After the Gunsight, it was point, track, shoot. The computer handled the gambling. I just flew the airplane and pulled the trigger when the math said to. German military analyses conducted after the war acknowledged the Gunsight's decisive impact. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland, in his 1954 memoir, The First and the Last, wrote, "The Americans' computing Gunsight was among the most significant technological advantages of the air war. We could counter their numerical superiority through tactics and determination. We could not counter a device that made every American pilot shoot like an expert.
Technology had replaced skill, and we had no corresponding technology. The Mk.14's influence extended into post-war fighter development. Every jet fighter designed by American manufacturers in the late 1940s featured gyroscopic computing gunsights as standard equipment. The F-86 Sabre, which would dominate Korean War skies, featured an improved Mk.18 gunsight operating on identical computational principles. Soviet fighter designs, influenced by captured German research and American technology, incorporated similar systems by 1950. The educational implications reached beyond military applications. MIT's Division 7, which had developed the Mk.14, applied lessons learned to post-war analog computer development. Engineers who had solved the differential equations of aerial gunnery in real time went on to design guidance systems for rockets, fire control systems for naval vessels, and early industrial process control computers. Technical documentation from the Mk.14 development program became foundational texts for control systems engineering. The methods used to stabilize gyroscopes, compensate for acceleration effects, and process multiple sensor inputs in real time informed the entire emerging field of automatic control theory. A device created to kill more efficiently became a teaching tool for an entire generation of engineers. The last combat employment of Mk.14 gunsights in World War II occurred on May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. Even as German forces surrendered across the continent, scattered Luftwaffe units continued flying. American fighters equipped with computing gunsights flew final patrols, ensuring compliance with surrender terms. No shots were fired. The technology that had achieved such decisive combat success ended its war in silence. Post-war accounting revealed that approximately 8,700 Mk.14 gunsights had been produced during the war. These devices, weighing 18 pounds each and costing $1,250 per unit to manufacture, represented a total investment of $10.9 million. The return on this investment, measured in American lives saved, enemy aircraft destroyed, and strategic bombing missions protected, was incalculable but undeniably decisive. The Mk.14 gunsight demonstrated a fundamental principle of modern warfare that would echo through subsequent conflicts. In modern combat, technological advantage compounds itself through network effects. A superior weapon system doesn't just improve individual performance, it transforms entire operational concepts, enabling tactics that were previously impossible and making opponent countermeasures obsolete before they can be implemented. The German fighter pilots who died over their homeland in late 1944 and early 1945 were not inferior aviators. Many were highly skilled professionals with years of combat experience. They were killed by a technological advantage they couldn't overcome through courage, determination, or tactical brilliance. The mathematics had shifted, and no amount of human excellence could compensate for computational precision operating at electronic speeds.